I'm Lynetta Linda, and this is the Penthouse Perspective. On this episode, I'm going to talk about self-love, self-respect, and self-trust. These are three key ingredients to self-awareness, and self-awareness leads to self-love, self-respect, and self-trust. So you can see they all work together. The first step towards building integrity is to start with self-love. We need to begin to defend ourselves, to protect ourselves, to love ourselves in the face of the challenges that we experience. Many of us abandon ourselves. We don't practice self-love when it comes to recognizing and respecting what we really want from life. We don't practice self-love when we abandon our feelings, when we don't listen to our feelings. We don't practice self-love when we say yes when we really mean no, or when we mean no when we'd really like to say yes. We don't practice self-love when we deny ourselves our dreams, when we deny ourselves anything good and wonderful. We are made of love, so the way back to it is through self-love. By practicing self-love on a daily basis in just a few little ways, you can dramatically change the experience that you're having in your life. Practicing things like listening to your body, tuning in. Is your body tired? Does it need rest? Are you ignoring it and pushing yourself harder? That is not practicing self-love. One of the fastest ways to determine whether we're doing something that's really good for ourselves or not is to use a reference of someone else that we really love. And this can be really easy when it comes to, for example, having children. Would you ask your child to demand of themselves what you are demanding of yourself right now? And oftentimes, when it's out of balance, when it's inappropriate, when it isn't self-love, we will immediately say, no, I would never ask my child to do that, or I would ask my child to stop doing that right away. I remember when I was working in women's shelters many years ago, I would ask women who had been in a relationship where they were being regularly battered and beaten, I would ask them if they would say to their child to go back to this relationship again. And it was amazing how many women would immediately respond, no, I would never tell my child to go back. And in that moment, they realized that they ought not to go back themselves. Practicing self-love means we put ourselves first, not at the expense of someone else that we're caring for like a child. You don't ignore the child's needs for dinner or care in order to go and do something you want to do. That is not truly practicing self-love. Self-love, when practiced correctly, will make enough room for others as well. It'll make enough room to love someone else and have enough left over for yourself at the end of the day. This is so important. So start asking yourself, am I loving myself? Am I honored by the choices that I'm making? Is my self-care on a daily basis something that is enhancing my growth, supporting my growth, and also supporting sustainability in the challenges that we're facing right now? Earth is in the greatest changes it's ever seen. And if we are not practicing self-love, we will simply not have what it takes to go the distance and survive these changes. That's the bottom line. So self-love at a very real level is imperative. When we start to practice self-love on a regular basis, self-respect starts to rise up. We start to respect ourselves and say, no, I'm not going to allow that boundary to be crossed. No, I'm not going to allow myself to be treated this way. We start to practice boundaries. We start to change our life and our relationships, recognizing that where we were not practicing self-love, we could also not be practicing self-respect. So self-respect is an automatic byproduct of self-love, to hold ourselves in high esteem. When we're asking ourselves about creating something, one of the questions that we must ask in order to create something sustainable is whether or not what we're trying to create is for the greater good of all, and at the very least that it will not harm anyone else, including ourselves. So practicing self-love means we have to start to ask those questions. Am I doing something here that isn't for the greater good of all, including me? And that'll often show us where we're practicing people-pleasing. And people-pleasing is always something done by someone who does not have self-esteem. We see our value outside of us, and that'll never work. We'll see our validation as something coming from outside of us. We'll see that if other people outside of us, external approval is there, then we'll feel good. But external approval can never always be there. So self-love leading to self-respect is imperative. The next thing that starts to happen once we start to practice self-love and then self-respect is self-trust. What is it to practice trust? To trust someone? To trust yourself means that you will act in your own best interest. To trust a friend means that that friend will act in your best interest even when you're not there. So this is where self-trust starts to become possible. Once we practice self-love and self-respect, we then become capable, we actually become able to practice making choices that are the best for us, not necessarily for the people outside of us. But once we have self-respect, we will no longer be people-pleasing. We will no longer need the people outside of us to approve of us in order to feel good that day. I don't need external approval. I don't need external validation anymore in my life. If I feel good about the choices that I'm making, and if I'm practicing self-love, I'll also respect the choices that I'm making. And then I'll trust the choices that I'm making. And I will trust myself to act in my own best interest. And this automatically leads to integrity. Integrity is to be whole, to be your whole self. The more we practice self-love, self-respect, and self-trust, the more complete and the more whole we become on a daily basis. Self-trust means in each and every moment, we'll begin to make a decision that serves us and our higher good. Not self-seeking, not selfish. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being honest with yourself, the first component of integrity. To be honest with yourself. In order to practice self-love, you're going to have to be honest with yourself about what you really want, about what you don't want, about what you really like, and about what you don't like. You have the right to live your life the way you choose to live it. Being honest with ourselves, practicing integrity through self-love, self-respect, and self-trust makes that possible. If we're not honest with ourselves, we can't even begin to practice self-love. So you'll see all of these qualities lead one to the other and back and forth. It's imperative that we practice them all simultaneously. So the first step of self-love that I would recommend that you do is to recognize that all you can do is do your best to do your best. No more beating yourself up, but begin to show up each day doing something loving for yourself. Check in with self-dialogue. That's one of the first things that needs to go. Start to tune into the way that you talk to yourself. In order to start to develop self-trust, we have to stop self-deprecation. How many times do we criticize ourselves on a daily basis? Take a look. You'll probably find there's quite a bit more than you knew. And if you've already cleaned it up, wonderful. Keep going. The more self-love we practice, the higher and higher we can grow in consciousness. It's like money in the bank. The more you put in, the more you're going to have over time. So is true also for self-love, which will then lead to self-respect, self-trust, and integrity. Tune in for more. Thank you for showing up today and listening for yourself.